Welcome to the latest episode of the best of Cool Culture Corner. We look back on early episodes of Cool Culture Corner and apply some of those principles to today in 2021 with a pandemic and divisiveness and political issues and business problems and all kinds of things in 2021, which we didn't even have 3, 4, 5 years ago. I am Ken Bator, your host for both the best of Cool Culture Corner and the podcast Cool Culture Corner. And we're going to talk about an episode that came out in 2017 titled Trust Your Talent. And I'm upset with myself that here, we're over a dozen episodes in for the best of Cool Culture Corner, and I haven't revisited this yet because I think it's so important that we get past that imposter syndrome and not be arrogant or have a huge ego, but also understand the value that we're bringing. So before I make a few comments, let's listen back at a portion of the early episode of Cool Culture Corner titled Trust Your Talent.
Our subject today, trust your talent. And I was reminded of this phrase just this week. It was a phrase that I actually learned a number of years ago in so-called consulting school. Yes, I actually did go to school for consulting. It was a 9-day intensive course, 9 days straight, so we even met on Sunday. How much fun for me. And there were a lot of great things that I learned from that. But I remember the instructor saying a number of times, and I appreciated that he did this, and his statement was just what I just said. Trust your talent. And the reason that he said that is there was so much to learn, but there was also a reticence, and I certainly felt this as well. It's like, well, who the heck am I to be telling this business owner or this executive or this CEO what he should be doing or she should be doing with their business, or guiding them down a certain strategy or a certain path. And thought, wow, that was a really cool statement in terms of just remembering, trust your talent. You don't necessarily have to be perfect, but you've got to trust that what it makes sense and will make sense at the right time. And I think, if we could just use that more often in our mentoring, in our cultures with our employees. Because there's so many times where, especially using the DISC profiles, if we've got a high I or an IS or something like that, where they might be unsure of themselves or unsure of the process, but you as a mentor, manager, leader, they could do it, even though they're asking the same question for the sixth time. You know that they could do it, and for all you high Ds out there like me, your dominant styles, that naturally, ticks you off because you don't want to play 20 questions. You just want somebody to go do their job. You don't necessarily always have the patience for mentoring. You don't always have the patience to answer the same question an eighth and a ninth and a 10th time. And sometimes we get a little bit short with people, sometimes for good reasons. Sometimes, we probably could have made a better choice. But, I suggest using that phrase, trust your talent, when it's appropriate in mentoring your staff for a better culture. I was running into that with a client right now who has a very intelligent, very green salesperson who has the right level of personality and attitude, and as well as gumption, if you will, to do the job. But she's unsure of herself, and despite some of the things that I and the owner have trained her on, still questions herself on some of the same things. Like, well, what if I do this instead? Or, should I send this email? Should I pick up the phone? Should I should I bring the owner on in this call? And that's you certainly could, but one of the things I told her is, you know what, you got this. Trust your talent, and unless you're in healthcare or you're a first responder or something like that, odds are the job that employee is doing is not a life and death type of job. That if she does in this case, if she fails, if he fails in another case, is it going to be the end of the world? In this particular scenario, no. As I told her, it's the worst that happens is we don't get the business, we lose the prospect, and we just have to put them in our email system, and maybe we get the business later on, maybe we don't, who knows. But then we learn something and we move on to the next prospect, to the next business development call and opportunity. Nobody's going to die, nobody's going to get fired, nothing extremely bad is going to happen that we can't come back from. So trust your talent, trust your instincts, and go forth and do it. Use that in your mentoring, and I believe if you do, that you'll be well on your way to a cool culture corner.
All right, so a few points that I want to really harp on from that is first off, that there's a lot of failure today. Some of it may be our fault as entrepreneurs or executives. Others completely out of our control. I keep going back to restaurants that had to shut down for good, even after being around for decades because of what COVID and the reaction to COVID did to those small businesses. It's still pains me and hurts my heart to think about that. But to realize that whether it was your fault, completely not your fault, or somewhere in between, usually a lot of times, the truth is somewhere in the middle. Let's take the failure. Yeah, not necessarily wallow in it, but embrace it for a minute, understand it, and go back to trusting our talent. There was a reason why we started that small business. There maybe have been a reason, especially if it had been around for decades while it was doing that well. And maybe it wasn't our fault, but let's trust our talent to move forward in any way, shape, or form that looks like. And maybe that is starting a new restaurant. Maybe that's starting a different small business. Maybe that is embracing a traditional role as an employee or a manager for somebody else. Whatever the heck that is, trust our talent to move forward and leverage that talent into something good again. I think I can't stress that enough. And also sometimes, COVID has affected our business in ways that doesn't shut down our business, but is just tore it apart. I'm thinking of one particular client that I had for a number of years that I no longer have, but the reason being is their culture completely fell apart. And it had to do with the response to COVID and certain things that I'm not going to get into because one, I don't share client information on these shows, and two, it's too in depth. But that's a good executive that unfortunately through unfortunate situations and ripple effects that culture fell apart. And the last thing I would want somebody to do in that situation, whether that individual is trying to put the pieces back together or move on to something else, is to wallow in that. You had talent in that particular business that drove it to a great level. And whether it was your fault, not your fault, or somewhere in between, we need to trust that talent moving forward because there's talent there. The last things that I'll mention is in mentoring. I talked a little bit about DISC in that original episode. And it was kind of almost like a non sequitur. This is one of the painful things of looking back at some of those episodes, going, "Well, what was I doing?" But just from a mentoring standpoint, one, I think that DISC is a valuable tool, not the only tool, but that some people with certain personality types just have a little bit more trouble trusting their talent. And you, as a mentor, need to help them through that. And I found that telling them to trust their talent does help that. But yeah, also, especially as difficult as things may be today, unless you're one of our proud people in healthcare or a first responder, odds are you're not dealing with life and death situations. And while certainly we don't plan to fail, let's not let the possibility of failure keep us in fear and from the ability to move forward. If we move forward and make a mistake, odds are it's not life and death in our business. We can recover from that. Let's not let that fear or imposter syndrome or anything related to that keep us from taking that next step, regardless of how big a step it is. So trust your talent and use that to either build or rebuild a cool culture corner in your unique business. Thanks for spending some time with me, and take care.
Now a word from our sponsor, Bator Training and Consulting. BTC is the creator of the B plus C plus S formula. Our clients that implement that formula increase their net income by 124% and grow their business by 17% on average. The best place to start working with Bator Training and Consulting is with our B plus C plus S audit. The service pinpoints issues as well as attributes of your business's unique brand, culture, and strategy. Learn more or sign up for a B plus C plus S audit at www.btcinc.net/BCS-audit.